Hello, welcome to Fireside Chats. I am Magla Pillay, and today we'll be taking up the subject of facing death and the subject of immortality. This is something that you and I have thought about more than once in our lives because it's something that we have to face. At least that is the subject of death. It's not a pleasant topic, one we tend to avoid, and yet death has its place, an important place in almost every religion and every culture across the globe. It is an important part and an important aspect of our existence as human beings. It's also a very sore topic, one that we choose to avoid, one that we're afraid of. It brings up a host of often negative emotions. I have here today in the studio with me Sister Denise, who will be sharing her insight and knowledge into the topic, and more specifically how to prepare oneself mentally for the inevitable, and also help us with understanding how to deal with the subject of death. Sister Denise has been practicing Raj Yoga meditation for over 40 years. Sister Denise, thank you very much for being here. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Death, it causes most people to cringe, doesn't it? And I think for many, it's their worst fear. It's a very deep-seated fear that we all have of dying. Could you take us through that? Why is it the case? Has it always been the case?
Death assumes that you will cease to exist, that term, death. And one of the things about spirituality is that it says, well, you know, there is no such thing as death, as the end of your existence. And this is why I think it's interesting that we're talking about facing death, but also facing immortality, because I think it's more difficult to face immortality than to face death.
Why?
Well, because you have to live with yourself forever. And if you're not right with yourself, you're in trouble for a very, very long time.
Okay.
Immortality is something that I think in earlier centuries, when the different religious scriptures were put together, it was something that was sort of ruled out, because it's so difficult to face. And death is so simple. You just kill people and then they're gone. But immortality means you destroy their bodies, but you don't destroy them. And so you never sever your connection with that person or your debt to that person. So facing immortality means you are facing the consequences of your actions without limit, which means I think facing immortality means that you really have the best incentive of all to make sure that you are right with yourself and that your actions are according to your conscience. Now, facing death is facing your attachment with your body, or dealing with your attachment with your body, because, you know, you're identified with your body, you identify with other people's bodies. I mean, if you have a soul, just a point of light, you can't tell who that is. Could be anyone. You really don't know. You only can know the contents of a soul, or who that soul is, when they are manifest through their life, through their incarnation. And in fact, to know yourself or anyone else, but the only one that you really live with forever is yourself. That is, you know yourself through the whole cycle of your reincarnations, you know. So that is not something that you can know through the normal methods, which is to know things through sense perception. But you see, the human being is totally into sense perception. And so there you are, at the end of your life, old people are always talking about leaving their bodies and telling everybody, you know, I'm going to die soon. So they're really thinking about it. And many of the religions have procedures for preparing yourself for death. You have to, you know, get rid of all your things, pass everything on, start turning your attention to God, because death is a passage, a transition, where you leave this world of the physical and you go to God. And so when you go to God, you're going to a being who can see you totally. So then you have to look at yourself and see, okay, do I want to be seen like totally? Am I ready to be seen? So part of the preparation for death is really cleaning up your karma. You want to go to God pure, then that means you realize you're not pure. How do you become pure? You become pure through your link with God, which is your meditation. And so what are the impurities? So the negative. And you know, another thing that happens when somebody's close to death is all of their negative stuff comes out. So what you need to do is invoke all of your negative stuff, come out and deal with it yourself, so that by the time you go, you are clean. So that's an important part of it. You're clean and you're free, you see, because we become bonded to matter, to material things, to material places. And so the preparation for death is all about letting go. You let go of your people, you let go of your stuff, you let go of your places, and you familiarize yourself as far as possible with the world beyond, because you will not cease to be. You will go to where your karma takes you. So this is why there's a lot of attention on pure karma, on charity, so that your next incarnation is one that you really want it to be, you know, and that it's not a matter of settling unresolved karma. So you try to resolve all your karma in this incarnation. Another thing which is really helpful is when you have a near-death experience.
Helpful, you say?
Helpful, yes.
I see. Okay.
A lot of people get near-death experiences.
As a result of some terrifying occurrence.
Well, no, not necessarily. Sometimes people get a near-death experience on an operating table where their heart stops or something like this, and then they experience themselves actually coming out of their body, looking down, seeing their body, and then sometimes they will remember their relatives or something, and that remembrance will pull them back in, because they will say, oh, I'm not ready to go yet, you know. But very often, for people who have had such an experience, it takes them away from, it frees them up from the fear of death, because they know that death is not the end. They know that they are definitely something, someone, a complete self, as distinct from their body, you know, and they feel that. So they know that death means I leave my body. It doesn't mean I cease to exist, you see. So in our language that we use in Brahma Kumaris, we don't really talk about people dying. We talk about them leaving their bodies and incarnating somewhere else, you know. A person who has a near-death experience also realizes that it's not time yet. And then when it is time, then I have to go. But it's not time yet, so I can't go. So then they become aware that, in a way, there's something destined, you see. And that also changes how you feel about death. So if it's not your time, you can't. And if it is your time, any little thing can be a cause of death.
Mm. So Denise, the fear factor is one of the greatest challenges as far as facing death, as you just stated. Could you talk us through that? How does one conquer fear, overcome fear, make peace with the feelings of I'm at end? Because while one may understand what you just said intellectually, there's still underlying feelings that tend to plague one. And not just fear of your own demise, but fear what's going to happen to my children, my spouse, my parents, etc. There's all those things that hold on, what we've created,
So
that holds on to you.
This is attachment. And attachment is a big vice, you see. And attachment is an illusion because, you cannot argue with death. You can't say, oh, well, my parents might not like it if I die, and death will say, well, too bad, you're coming with me, And so you have to realize that, there are a lot of things that are not in your control. And the date of your death is, in a sense, something that's fixed in advance. And then people may or may not like it, but there's nothing you can do about it. In the same way, when somebody does leave their body, the people who are left behind, they are very often extremely upset. Because there is attachment with the departed person. And so the grieving process is important to go through to let go of that person. But if, as part of your lifestyle, on a continuing basis that everyone is eternal and immortal and death can come at any time, and you factor that into your thinking and feeling and so on, when it comes, it's much more manageable than when you say, well, I don't care what reality is, I have my preferences and I want to, have this relationship forever. You're really deluding yourself. Nothing is forever. And I think, part of the world of materialism that we're living in is that we feed people these ideas that, I will love you till the end of time. Well, I don't think so. And when is that, by the way? You see, so people feed in these delusions and illusions, and it causes a lot more suffering.
Okay. I have to ask you this question. Does death end love? If you love a soul, does death end the feeling of love?
I don't think so. If you have a very deep relationship with another person, chances are you'll find each other in another lifetime. And very often, people will meet others who they bond with immediately. They have an immediate good relationship. And, you can understand that that's not the first time they have been together, you see. So, I would say there are souls who are always, not too far away from each other. There are some people you meet, you never have anything to do with them. Your relationship is very slight, and then there's other people, you just see them, you say, oh yeah, I know you. Some people, you see them, I hate you. There's some karmic problem that has brought the people together, but there's some sort of problem which causes an immediate negative reaction. So then you have to work through that and use your power of discernment to understand what kind of a debt is there. And if it is a debt and you finish the debt and you part your ways and you've cleaned up the relationship, you see. But we have to face immortality, that I am always there and everyone else is always there, but who am I connected with and what's the quality of my connection? Because if there's anything that is not good quality, then that will have to be resolved. If not in this lifetime, then in the next one or the next one or whatever. But there is no escape.
So a spiritually aware person prepares themselves for death on a daily basis?
Yes, I
Is
think
that
so.
not morbid, Sister Denise?
Not really, because
It sounds
they're not
morbid.
preparing themselves for death, they're preparing themselves for continuity. And they also have to, death is a transition. It's a change of costume. It's a change of role. And a person who is embarking on a spiritual practice wasn't always having that spiritual practice. They were body conscious, they were having a very different relationship with death. And so whatever was part of their consciousness before they started to think this way, they have to work through that.
Okay.
And so that's a continuing process. And you see, the other thing is that because the soul is weak at this time, it means, you have to really fill yourself up with spiritual strength so that you can actually get the sanskar of leaving the body at will. You see, because when people are body conscious, they're subject to death. They get taken by death. You want to turn that situation around. So I am the master and I decide when I will die. And that means you recognize, okay, yeah, today it looks like a good day. I will die today. Yeah. That's something new and different.
That is
And there
something
you
very
just
new and
come
very
out of your
different.
body.
Okay. Yes, Denise, I once heard it said that every single person who dies does so with a feeling of regret. Okay, that may not be true for every single person, but for the vast majority. How do you make sure that when you're facing your final moments, there isn't a feeling of, oh, if I only, oh, if I should, oh, if I didn't. You think of all your omissions and you think of all your commissions, and it's not just thoughts; they flash before your eyes like hard, heavy feelings, and
This is
with it a
why-
feeling of sorrow.
This is why it's good to prepare for your death every day. Because if you live as if each day is your last day, you have an opportunity every day to take care of some of those omissions and commissions and so on. Because it's a piece of work, a big piece of work that you can't do 5 minutes before your death.
No, you can't.
And so it's not at all morbid to prepare for your death. You know as a soul that the date of your death is fixed, and every day you're getting closer to it. And when you're right upon it, you can feel it. It's not going to be a surprise. Then you have to move through it and go further. So you have to really know that there is continuity.
Okay. Tell us how you enlist the help of the divine through this process. How does she help you with this?
Well, God is the only one that you can be with life after life after life after life. Because you can be with God before your death, during your death, and after your death. Whereas all the other people, you're with them before your death. They might be around during your death, but they're not going to die with you. And they're not going to be there on the other side. Whereas God is with you at every step. So that's a big difference.
Okay. In your spiritual practice that you just mentioned in preparing for death, God helps you how exactly? For you?
Well, God is your teacher who says, pay attention, you're immortal. Deal with your immortality. This is why I say facing immortality is actually much bigger than facing death. You see, because facing death, you just have to understand that it's not the end. And you really must integrate yourself with your soul and quit being a materialist. Facing immortality means that, you know, everything you do, everything you are, is going to be with you forever, you see. So that's a much bigger thing. And what you want is to be right with yourself, you see. You want not to have anything on your conscience.
And your relationship, Sister Denise, how do you sort that out? How do you want us to work very hard to not create deaths with people, don't you? So how do you, we all have debts with people. How do you, and I don't mean just the financial ones, I mean the other more serious long-term debts. How do you put things right with people so that you can also enjoy the relationship whilst you're still in your costume and can leave at will? How do you keep that right? Because I think that is the second biggest challenge, apart from making peace with your own death, that you leave behind people that mean the world to you.
Well, that's the mistake. If you leave behind people that mean the world to you, it means that you haven't paid attention to your spirit. You haven't paid attention to your relationship with God. You have put people in a position of being the world to you, which they cannot be, because all your relationships are finite. They're temporary in the form that they take. You see.
You saying, what are you saying? Love people but don't love them too much?
Definitely.
So limit your love?
Well, it is said
Isn't that cold, Denise?
It is said in spiritual practice, try to have all relationships with God, because what is love? You know, love with people is a little bit more like, what will that person do for me? You see, it's quite selfish. And so when you love somebody, often enough you are deluding yourself and you're saying, okay, I will act in a loving manner towards this person so that this person will give the return of that to me. So it's a dealing all the time. And what you want to do when your karma is right is to make sure that the give and take keeps you on a level where you're not in debt. You're not depending on somebody. You don't allow somebody to depend on you. You perform your role accurately, but you do not create a situation where somebody believes that you are going to be there for them when you're not able to. You know, so you have to be very, very honest in this way. And the most honest thing is to communicate to people that, look, I can be around to some extent, but you have to rely on your relationship with God, because God can be with you, you know, infinitely and indefinitely. But I only to some extent, because I'm an actor and we're playing these different scenes. I arrived, I perform, I will go. Don't expect me to be here forever. And then that honesty maybe people don't like, but you have to choose between you want the truth or you want some warm fuzzy feeling, which eventually is going to turn into something very different. You see, the truth is such a problem because it's unpleasant a lot of the time.
Okay, so we'll end on that note, truth being unpleasant. Thank you so much for joining us today. And I think you have shared in such a way that you've caused some shockwaves in the mind of listeners, which is not necessarily a bad thing, because this could be a wake-up call for many. For those of you who are listening, I don't blame you if you fastened your seatbelts to your lounge chair, because this was quite a an earful for many of you. And if you find that the subject matter was too heavy to deal with, just bear in mind a sentence or two, a line or two that did sit well with you. And perhaps listen to this again, because it's a subject that one should think about, even though it may seem unpleasant to do so. What I like most about today's sharing was that it's not just death we have to face, or the thought of leaving your own body, but also the quality of your life between now and the day that you die also determines what type of death you'll have and what you will do if you pass on and thereafter. A very deep and powerful message, very thought-provoking message, and I do hope that it changes your life for the better as a result of listening to this talk. So thank you very much for joining us, and we hope to see you soon. Thank you, and goodbye.